Assalamu alaikum. Today I want to talk about what is arguably the most important surah in the Quran, Al-Fatihah, and specifically verse 7, which delves into some very important issues surrounding the nature and the attributes of God. In the lead up to verse 7, verse 6 is imploring God to lead us to the straight path. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. Verse 7 then explains what the straight path actually is, and it reads, Siratul ladhina an'amta alayhim ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. In translating this verse, we can divide it into three parts. First, it describes what the straight path is. Siratul ladhina an'amta alayhim. Sirat, path. Al-lazin, the relative clause, that. An'amta, comfortable, or commonly understood as blessed. Alay, upon, followed by the pronoun suffix for third person plural, him. Them, not to be confused with the English him. And the most simple and straightforward way to interpret this sentence is a path for those that have blessings upon them. The last two parts of the verse describe what the path is not, and reads, غَيْرَ الْمَغْضُوبِ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَدَّالِّينَ. So to break it down, غَيْرَ, not, al-maghdubi, the anger, alayhim, upon them, which translates most directly as, not a path for those that have the anger upon them. And the last negation, waladdallin, or the path of the lost. It is this first negation, al-maghdubi alayhim, that we will be focusing on today. And the reason for that is that it is a phrase that has been, and continues to be, distorted and misrepresented in English translations. To illustrate my point, one needs only go to any mainstream Quranic translation source, let's say Quran.com. Here we can see that the site provides 10 translators, and very quickly we see that almost all of the translations translate the word al-maghdubi as God's anger or God's wrath, expressed through the phrases your anger, your wrath, or you are displeased with. In each case, it clearly implies that the anger in this verse is derived directly from God himself. And when it is seen here in the context of verse 6, i.e. the blessed path, it appears as some kind of counterbalance to God's mercy, both emanating from God, and both equivalent. To paraphrase, give me your blessings, not your wrath. This is despite the fact that there exists no possessive pronoun in the word that would indicate the anger belongs to anyone, let alone God. Even Quran.com's de facto official translation inserts a your in parenthesis next to anger. This is particularly ironic, given that the same site provides a link to a video of someone specifically pointing out that to interpret this as being God's anger is wrong.
A lot of translations say worthy of your anger, the path of those, not the path of those who received your rage or who received your wrath. The word your isn't even there in the Arabic. It shouldn't be translated that way.
So why is this wrong? To answer this, we need to examine how these two attributes are depicted throughout the Quran, and how quickly we see how God's blessings and mercy are not only given far more weight than his anger, but in fact the two are almost completely incomparable. The fact that every surah in the Quran except one begins with the phrase Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, in the name of God the All-Merciful and the Giver of all mercy. The descriptions of God's mercy in all its many forms is vivid and detailed, repeated again and again throughout the Quran. In 2 verses, mercy is described as being ordained or prescribed upon himself. Yet the Arabic word used here is far more profound than these English translations give credit for. It uses the trilateral root kataba, which literally means written, as if to say mercy has been written into him, etched onto his very essence.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
Of all the names ascribed to God in the Quran, around 81 of them, it is replete with different descriptions of mercy, including the compassionate, the protector, the forgiving, and the loving. Not one of these 81 names relate to any descriptions of anger or wrath. The contrast in the Quran between descriptions of God's mercy and descriptions of God's anger could not be more stark. Divine retribution and wrath, where it appears in the Quran, is scarce and far less vivid than the descriptions of divine mercy. As this scholar explains, the distinction between the two comes down to what constitutes the core essence of God and what doesn't.
But God is described as being forgiveness and merciful, and that is something innate to God. So for God to be merciful and kind, he doesn't need a reason. That's just who he is. But for him to punish somebody, that requires a reason, because the punishment comes from an external factor. It's not innate to God. That's not what defines God, that he is a punishing deity.
The 13th century Sufi scholar Ibn Arabi emphasizes this same theme in his writings, who, according to a translation by the scholar William C. Chittick, describes wrath as an accident, which occurs quite distinctly from the essence of God, which is good alone. To be clear, Ibn Arabi's use of the word accident here is not implying that God has no control over who receives his wrath, or even that it is not specifically directed by God. Clearly it is. As described in Quranic verse 7:156, I inflict my punishment on whom I will, even attaching the pronoun my to punishment. But the point is, the punishment does not derive from anything that is innate to God. It is detached and distant from God. Unlike his blessings and mercy, which is etched into his very essence. Indeed, this same verse continues, but my mercy encompasses all things. So what's all this got to do with verse 7 of Surah Al-Fatihah? Al-Fatihah literally means the opening, and is the first or opening chapter of the Quran. And just like any opening chapter of a book, it serves to set the tone and summarizes the key themes of the entire book. But of course, Al-Fatihah is more than just an opening chapter of a book. It is the chapter that is recited by far the most by Muslims, at least 17 times a day in prayer, as well as being the go-to recital for anything from grieving departed loved ones to comforting oneself when feeling afraid. Why is this? As a younger version of our good doctor explains,
It is called Al-Fatihah, which means the opening. It's called Al-Quran, the mother of the Quran. It is called Al-Fatihah because obviously he opens the book. You open the book and there it is. It is the opening chapter. And it is called Quran because or mother of the Quran, because in a way it encapsulates within its 7 verses the message of the entire Quran.
Key point being that it contains the core essence of the Quran. And for that reason, the clear use of the impersonal term, the anger, as distinct from God's anger, is not a mere semantic point. It is introducing the concept exactly as the Quran and the religion intends, as something that is very much distinct from anything that emanates from God's essence, Ibn Arabi's accident, something which is directed by God but not of God. In stark contrast to how blessings and mercy is described, which is very much something that is innate to God, that can be described as radiating from Him. And returning back to how anger is portrayed in verse 7 of Al-Fatihah, it uses the second-person masculine past tense form of the verb blessed, an'amta, to describe the blessed path. So it quite literally translates as your blessings, very much in contrast to how anger is described, which is the impersonal definite noun, the anger. And furthermore, in the preceding verses, the description of God as the most merciful and giver of all mercy is mentioned not once but twice in this short surah, as if to really hammer home the point. No, not that hammer. Let's try this one. Yeah, that hammer. And indeed, as we saw before, this same emphasis on the innateness of God's mercy is repeated over and over throughout the whole Quran. The contrast these depictions have with the scant and impersonal depictions of God's wrath could not be more obvious. And to portray God's mercy and God's anger as somehow equivalent and comparable is an injustice to the Quran and it's not right. In summary, interpreting al-Maghdub as God's anger is not only grammatically incorrect, it is a fundamental mischaracterization of the intent and tone of the entire message contained in the Quran. And for that reason, it is important that such a mischaracterization should be called out and challenged wherever it occurs.